All right, today we're going to be talking about how to speed up your prints and how to do them a lot cheaper. If you can see right here, the model that we're going to be looking at is the Arc de Triomphe. We're not actually going to print this, we're just going to use it to get some data. What I'm printing right now, I did not use this technique, and it's going to take me about 6 hours to print this thing. Now, if I had used it, then it would have shaved off maybe up to 2 hours on that print, and that's a big deal, especially if you're going to be using your printer to make things that you are selling. So what we're looking at right now is the model that I pulled off of my mini factory, and right now we have it set to about a 20% infill density. Now what that's saying is that of all of the vacancy inside of the model, we are going to be filling 20% of that vacancy with support structure to keep it structurally sound. Let's go ahead and slice this so you can see what it looks like inside. It's a lot more beneficial to just see what I'm talking about than to try to understand it on your own. So it says this model is going to take us 17 hours and 32 minutes to print, and it would be about this big, for what that's worth. But let's look at the preview. So you can see here what I'm talking about. These green lines inside of it is what constitutes that 20% infill. You can see it's pretty densely packed in there. And what this is doing is making sure that, one, you can't crush your model super easily from the outside, and also it creates the structural support inside of it in order for you to put the top structures on the ceilings or roofs or whatever it ends up being. Now, 17 hours and 32 minutes, also take note, it's gonna cost us about $7.81 for us to print that. I'm calculating that at about $20 for a kilogram of filament. So now what we're gonna use is this little known Cura setting called gradual infill steps. And that is hugely beneficial in speeding up the time of your prints and also in reducing the cost of your prints, which makes a pretty big deal when you're trying to actually get throughput on your machine. So I'm gonna use this and I'm gonna set it at a 2, and we're gonna reslice this. But before we look at what it does, we are going to learn what the gradual infill steps are as it pertains to the actual infill. Okay, so for an example of exactly how this gradual infill steps work, we are using just a basic cylinder so that we're not worrying about complex geometry or different structures coming up and combining at the same time. And so you can see here the basic cylinder that we're using and what it does with the 2 gradual infill steps. And we want to ultimately top out at 20%. The first step is going to be a 5% infill, and that is going to fill the bulk of the structure until it is just barely off of that top surface that we want it to, where we want to have that 20%. And so this is how that works. You can see that the cellular packing here isn't very dense. This is the 5%. And then once it hits that next threshold where it's into the second step, it has a 10% infill. So you can see now that this is much higher up than it was. We're at the 5%. Where I put the settings for the Arc de Triomphe, it was 1.5 millimeters off of the top for each of the 2 steps. I've made that much more drastic here just for clarification purposes. But you can see when you compare the 5% and the 10%, that it's twice as dense there during the next step. And then finally at 20%, you can see that it's packed in much, much, much tighter than it was before. That's saying that for every 1 line that it lays down, then there are 4 lines equivalent that it leaves empty. And that is how you achieve the gradual infill steps, especially if we need something like 20% up at the top so that we have a good, clean surface. It saves us a lot of material all the way down. So let's go back over into Cura and see what this looks like for our Arc de Triomphe. Okay, so we're back over in Cura here, and we have set our 2 gradual infill steps, and we want each step to be 1.5 millimeters. And so what that's gonna do is when it starts filling up the infill from the bottom of the internal structure, it's gonna be 5%. And it's gonna start filling that all the way up, and then when it is 3 millimeters from the structure that it's going to try to support internally, it's going to jump that up to 10%. It doubles every time. And then when that 10% is now 1.5 millimeters from the final structure it's going to support. Then it's going to go up to the full 20% that we were talking about, that we told Cura that we wanted. Now, that's probably one of the biggest lies Cura is going to tell you, is you set your infill density at 20% when realistically, most of the structure inside is well less than that. However, let's slice it and see what happens to both the time that it's going to take us to print this and the price that we're going to see. So it has gone down to 12 hours and 8 minutes and also $4.11. Okay, let's talk about what this means, especially if you make and sell things with your 3D printers like I do. So let's use this Arc de Triomphe as a little bit of a case study. Let's say under previous circumstances, you could make and sell 3 of these models every day, and you were selling them for $15 each. Now remember, the way that it was before, it cost you $7.81 to manufacture each of these in your raw materials. Your total profit on a daily basis would come out to $18.87. Now, because we've overall reduced the time it's going to take us to print each of these products, and we've reduced the cost, we are now going to be able to make 4 of them on a daily basis because of that 30% gain, and we're going to make more money on each one because of the reduction in cost. So let's see what that looks like. 4 models in a day, we're still selling them for $15 each, but they're costing us $4.11. Now that profitability has more than doubled and gone to $43.56, and that is using the same equipment. It's just taking less time and less material to do that. As you can see, gradual infill steps are integral if you are going to be using your 3D printers to make and sell things. You need to understand this tool. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out. Let's talk about it, because there are more advanced techniques that can save you even more time, produce better quality finishes, and save you more money.